So NEDLAC is concerned about the impact of extortion in business. Business extortion occurs when individuals or groups, often through threats or coercion, demand money, services or assets from a business entity in exchange for protection or to prevent harm. Extortionists can target businesses across various sectors. This is from small startups all the way up to large corporations, employing a wide array of tactics to achieve their illicit goals. But for more on this, we are now joined by NEDLAC constituency head Thulani Tshefuta. Mr. Tshefuta, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Why did you feel this was the right time to speak up as NEDLAC?
Thank you very much, and good morning as well to the viewers of Newzroom Afrika. This is an emerging issue which is becoming a national crisis now. And our view is that we must first and foremost make it explicitly clear that we view this as crime in its broader context, and crime that does not only affect businesses, but it affects businesses in the same way it would affect households, individuals, and communities. And so when we say we must characterize it as crime, first and foremost, it is then going to challenge us to respond to it as such. In as far as why it is important that it is attended to now is because if left unattended, it is going to spread as cancer into a network of lawlessness that will ultimately lead into anarchy, where everyone defines the manner in which they may want anyone in South Africa to give them the money they believe they deserve, whether they worked for it or not. And so there has to be a line that we draw and say it ends now.
Yeah, I'm wondering, though, around whether or not you feel that now that there seems to be so much attention on the issue of extortion, and certainly arrests taking place in Gauteng, we're seeing arrests taking place in the Eastern Cape. If we've done too little too late, that the damage has already been done, that the culture in and of itself has become so inculcated in the way that people conduct business in our local communities.
With all of these which you are citing, we are the ones who are now welcoming the whole of society, giving attention to the issue. It has been one of the campaigning issues for civil society that is represented and led by us at NEDLAC. It is an issue that even when we had discussions about the economic reconstruction and recovery plan in South Africa, we insisted that this is one of the aspects. Criminality affecting those sectors of business and community is one of the issues that must be attended to. We even went in our characterization to the extent of arguing that crime and corruption must be assumed as constant variables in our social and economic endeavors. We must just assume that it will be there. And therefore, our plans must factor in a response in advance as to how we're going to respond to this. So with all of the efforts that you are counting as taking place now, we are welcoming them as response to our campaign endeavors in elevating this issue into the levels of prominence that it should have. And it has began to get the prominence it is getting because it has elevated a little bit higher than the individual households that have always been victims of this. It has elevated to levels of communities above those that have been affected in rural areas, in isolated townships. It is beginning to touch the nerve of the economy. Yeah. That is why it is beginning to get the prominence it is getting. And so, with all of this, we are then saying we welcome the response. It is what we have been calling for. Yeah. So everyone else is joining into a call that we have been making.
You know, I want to go back to the basics, if you'd allow me, right? NEDLAC in and of itself, and I'm looking now at your mission, for instance, the mission of NEDLAC, and one of the things that it says is that you're calling for the effective participation in the labor market and socio-economic policy and legislation to facilitate consensus and cooperation between government, labor, business, and the community in dealing with South Africa's socio-economic challenges. I think that's an important point to raise what the mission of NEDLAC is in bringing different aspects of our society together for socioeconomic challenges to be dealt with for economic growth. But that at the heart of this extortion mess is the idea of business forums versus construction mafias. So where, in NEDLAC's view, do we draw the line and say, well, business forums are calling for 30% of a project because it is in the best interest of transformation versus it being criminal extortion? Where do you draw that line?
We must locate then this matter very, very appropriately. In our view as the community constituents of NEDLAC, which represents civil society in the chambers of NEDLAC, we're of the view that one of the most important factors about support for business is the creation of an enabling environment. And acts of criminality go against the establishment of that enabling environment. And when we say that, we must be mindful of the fact that if we get to challenge ourselves to do transformation right, it will then close space for those who execute criminality in the acts of what we call extortion as we see it. So by denouncing acts of extortion, it is not the same as saying that 30% procurement must not go into local enterprises. So if those who have the projects that they are implementing in communities can be disciplined in their implementation of the 30% subcontracting set aside into local businesses, then there would not be instances as high as we experience now. It is because people who implement projects to the total isolation of the transformation imperatives that should go with procurement in the form of the 30% set asides, in the form of subcontracting of the local businesses. And so what we must make clear and very clear is that we still insist on the use of and leverage of procurement as a lever of transformation and empowerment for local communities, for small enterprises in townships and rural communities.
Yeah.
And so it still goes in support of the spirit of what you just cited as the mission of NEDLAC. We are in full support of that, but then still, even in instances where that those set-asides and that procurement into small businesses and communities is not done, does not give anyone any right to wake up and go and make those demands. It goes against the spirit of attracting investments. It goes against the spirit of growing the economy. It goes against the spirit of service delivery to the projects that are being implemented that would now otherwise be delayed.
Let me ask you this, because this is now a really interesting part of the conversation, isn't it, right? That transformation, yes, is important. The 30% set-asides, yes, is important. So how would you then describe the difference between a business forum and a construction mafia that is extorting from businesses? Where's the line for you? So at what point does a business forum become a mafia, in your view?
Business forums are legal in South Africa. Business associations are legal in South Africa. Some of the organizations that are the voice of business at different levels of organization of business are basically business fora. It is an initiative that we should support in actual fact. The prerequisite for the plight and the interest of small and black business to be taken serious, in our view, is that they must first and foremost be organized. In being organized, it means that when local businesses in a community here in Craddock decide that we are going to establish a forum wherein we share ideas, wherein we organize ourselves, wherein we advocate for our businesses and interests, that should be viewed as a progressive move. But where the same platforms are used for criminality, then they become the mafias.
Okay.
No one should be held at ransom by any form of association to say, give us business or else. No one should be held at ransom at a community level to say, give us this protection fee or else you will be attacked.
Okay.
Because it is almost a known fact that those who operate as mafias will say, give us a fee
Or else.
so that we protect you against us.
Right, I got you. Okay, I'm gonna just close it off with one last question, if you allow me, Mr. Tshefuta. You know, we've got, again, I mentioned this, Aldrin is in the Eastern Cape. He's spoken to the Premier of the Eastern Cape, for instance, who has denied allegations by the Abatembu King, Dalindyebo, that the Premier is somehow involved in some of these extortion syndicates or upper in the ranks, if you will. And it seems to be a war of words between two seemingly very powerful men in the Eastern Cape. What do you make of that? Is that a step in the right direction, yes or no? I'm talking about the debate between the two of them.
It is a step in the right direction, because when people speak about extortion and speak in parables, it does not help solve the situation. In our view, we welcome the fact that the king has actually mentioned names, including the name of the Premier, because it then gives the Premier the opportunity of the right of response. And what we welcome about that is because if we just talk about parables, not mentioning, when you have information, you are then part of the problem. Whether correctly or incorrectly so, the fact that now a name has been mentioned, and we truly commend the steps of the Premier of the Eastern Cape, Mr. Oscar Mabuyane, by immediately reacting to the issue by opening a case. Because we always call in political platforms for people to take the legal steps when anything wrong has been done. And so now, the king has actually boldly claimed that he has evidence. He dared the Premier to say he must go and take him to court. And the Premier did not hesitate. The Premier did not delay. He took him to court. What then?
Right. I need to jump in there. I need to wrap up briefly. Yeah.
What then should be separated is that when the king is challenged and dead in that way, he can't come back and say, no, I'm a king, I can't be taken to court by a commoner like the Premier Oscar Mabuyane. He must go and answer in court. He must go and provide that evidence. Should he be found to have used a platform to lay allegations against people incorrectly, then he will be as equally as part of the problem. He may actually be the one who is using the Premier as a decoy in this equation.
Oh, well, we'll be watching to see how both leaders react, and we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Thulani Tshefuta is NEDLAC's constituency head there, representing communities and civil society.